I am so grateful for this. In case we do have new people, and I think we do with 2 or 3 months on the program and even shorter than that, I want you to know that it's really not just us Texans that give our sobriety date. It really isn't, even though we're accused of it. And we're accused of going ahead with our bragging routine. Whether it's 15 minutes of sobriety or quite a few years, we like to tell you about it. But the main reason we do, all over the country, not just Texans, but to assure you people that are coming to us in those early stages, know that Alcoholics Anonymous works. It has worked in my life since June the 19th, 1957. And I've been doing lots of living, and especially for my gals, because you'll notice I'm the token woman here. And if you thought Willie was a man, you're wrong. Don't think. Just checking, Charlie. But I'll be mainly directing a lot to the women, and I hope you men don't mind, because you're going to be getting plenty of help this weekend. But you gals know that I have lived through a lot of things since June the 19th, 1957. I've done a lot of living in that time. And Alcoholics Anonymous, the program that's being presented to you this weekend by these 2 beautiful men, is responsible for that length of sobriety. You can have it too. If you're getting it in this early stage of your sobriety, honey, hang on for dear life and don't miss a word this weekend, because they're giving you the recipe that you can live by. I doodled some things real fast up there on the board for you, because we're going to be considering step 1 this morning out of our 12 and 12. When God bless our beautiful Wesley up here, when he put this thing together, he wanted us to take these steps out, the 3 of us, and present them each one at a time, so that we can see what our 12 and 12 has further to say about these. Because, see, the 12 and 12 was written 14 years later than the big book. So a lot of thinking went into the 12 and 12, a lot more explanation. They saw that they had a new type of person coming into Alcoholics Anonymous. They weren't all the low-bottom drunks, as in the beginning. 14 years later, they began to attract people that had not gone to completely all the way down. And they wanted these steps to be clearer for everybody. So 14 years later, they had accumulated not different ideas, but to excel on the ideas that they're put forth in the big book. So our 12 and 12 was written. And we're going to be talking this morning about step 1, to isolate it and to look at what our 12 and 12 has added to what's in the big book. In our 12 and 12, it starts on page 21. And just as a little side, I was absolutely appalled when I was handed these statistics. I am from Spring, Texas. And, of course, no one knows where that is. In fact, people that pass through Spring, they still don't know where it is. It's a little German farming community 16 miles north of Houston. Now, we used to be about 26 miles north of Houston, but they keep gobbling us up and coming towards us. And so a lot of people think now that we are part of Houston. We are not part of Houston. We're still Spring, Texas. And it is a very, very small town. It was in the beginning, and when I was growing up there. And I often say that, it wasn't even large enough to have a village idiot. We just all took turns. But I work in and out of the Houston Intergroup. And I volunteer for the Houston Intergroup. And the lady up there that runs the whole shebang handed me these statistics the other day. And I know that we don't use a lot of this in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I thought maybe that you might enjoy looking at them. In 1985, we have a whole bunch of folks in Houston Now that's a big city. Millions of people. Not all Texans anymore. Just people from everywhere. Every walk of life. And in 1985, when she handed me this, I stood there in almost disbelief, and yet going all over the country the way I do, I thought, yeah, that's right, and maybe the group would like to see this. In 1985, the Houston Intergroup sold 40,690 desired chips, or white chips that you call them here. When people would pick up that desire to stay sober, 40,690 people. 1 month chips, 11,000. 2 months chips, 7,000. On down the line, look at those. Look at the jump between 9 months and 1 year. We still have quite a few of them from that 3,000 that we had 9 months. We still have quite a few. Then look at the way we start going down. 2 years and 1 year. Look at that 4 and 5 years. Then after 5 years, look where we go. We sold 370 10-year chips. 155 15-year chips. And we sold 730s. Now, I just got you through reassuring you that this is a lasting program. It can work in your life for the rest of your life. But you have to do what Joe and Charlie have started emphasizing. We have to work for it. We have to put into action some of the things that we start with. We have to do some footwork. And it's interesting that out of the 40,000 chips that were sold and given out, that there were 7,300 big books. Only 7,300. You reckon maybe that might be the reason why we start dropping down? Only 7,000 of those 40,000 got them a big book. And this is very much what I did in the beginning. I really wasn't interested in learning how to stay sober day after day and month after month. I just wanted to get out of trouble. I came to you as phony as a $3 bill. And when I looked at our step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. I thought, yes, maybe this does apply to some women, but not me. I had not had all that trauma in my childhood. I had not had a lot of difficulty in my life. I had never had feelings of inadequacy that I had to put booze inside of me in order to feel better. So when I heard these men, and I came to you in 1953. See, I didn't sober up, not completely, till 57. So you can grasp from that I am not a fast learner. I was not then, for sure. And in 53, there weren't many women in Alcoholics Anonymous. The men tolerated me and put up with me, and God bless them, they finally loved me sober. And for this, I will always be grateful for these men that really didn't know what to do with a woman alcoholic, because we are a mess. I knew I'd get a second to that someplace. I lecture out at the police academy in Houston, and I tell the young officers, you're going to have to learn how to arrest a woman drunk. Because there's all the difference in the world in arresting a woman drunk and a man drunk. That woman is so scared, so terribly afraid. And that fear comes out and an animal instinct. So you better stand back when you arrest a woman drunk. And it's real funny. After they've gotten on the police force and they come back and visit every once in a while, they say, you know, Willie, we didn't know exactly what you were talking about when you told us that, but we do now. I know you men hurt when you come in here, and I know that you have gone through terrible, terrible things, but the humiliation and the degradation and the feeling of shame that a woman drunk has no equal. And so when I looked at that step one and realized that I was admitting that I was an alcoholic, something that to me spelt weakness of character, a lack of any kind of willpower, something that I had always prided myself in having. I had had such a good life. I didn't have any way I could turn around and blame anybody. I had come from a very good, solid family. I had made a very good marriage. I had all the things. I was living the life that I had always dreamed of living. And I had the whole world. Until a beautiful man out in Rantoul, Illinois told me, he said, Willie, you know, sometimes the personality does bring on the alcoholism. But in just as many cases, the alcoholism brings on the personality. And yes, I did not have all these feelings of inadequacy. I didn't have there was not a self-conscious bone in my body. I had always liked people. I had always been comfortable with people. So I could not think in these terms of that I drank because of this and that and the other. And when the men would talk about the drinking to feel better and the drinking to feel good about themselves, I couldn't identify with this. And I fought it every step of the way. I didn't realize what alcohol had done to me after I started putting it into my system. After the allergy began to grow. You know, some allergies we have from the very beginning. I have taught children, when I was teaching in elementary school, youngsters that were diabetic. When I'd go on up to the junior high school and teach, some of those children would become diabetic during junior high school years. My mother did not become a diabetic till she was in her 70s. The chemical changes in the body, I know now, are not always the same. They do not catch us at the same time. When I begun to put alcohol into my system, I didn't know that the allergy began to work. It took a long time because I was a good, healthy, young, strong person. So a little at a time, this allergy began to grow. And it chipped away at Willie. It chipped away at all of the things that I was. I had not been a liar. I had not been a cheat. I had not been a rationalizer. I had not been an excuse maker. I had no reason to do any of these things. My life had been full and good. Alcohol made me that excuse maker. When it began to do things to me that I didn't understand, when it began to change my behavior and my very thinking processes, then of course I began to make excuses. I had to. And, you know, when you really get to thinking about it, most excuses, when you barrel them down and sieve them down real good, they become lies. Because that's another... You can, be late someplace. And instead of just saying, I'm sorry I'm late, you go into your excuse making. And pretty soon you're lying in your teeth. Because you're adding a little bit more to become a little bit more convincing on why you were late. So the excuses begun. The rationalizing started in. I did it because. So I turned into a liar over the years. And I turned into a cheat, and I turned into a phony. Alcohol did this to me. So, honey, if you're sitting there thinking, you know, my life was good, I really didn't have any reason to use alcohol to compensate for anything. Remember how an allergy grows sometimes. Some people, it affects them immediately. Some people, it takes a while. Let's look at our step one, and maybe we will quit fighting. We have people sitting around in Alcoholics Anonymous. They are sober. I sat here with you for years, and I was sober, but I damn sure wasn't going to be happy about it. And I didn't know what all this happy bullcorn y'all were putting out. Joyous? But I was sober. And of course now this is not what I want. I want it all. I want everything this program has to offer. God bless her, little Jeannie over there found me a coffee cup that says, I want it all. Because the first time she ever met me, I think she got the idea that that's the only way I'm going to have it. I want everything this program has to offer me. All of the joy and the contentment and the serenity and the peace of mind that I can possibly get out of it and still live out there in that world. I want it all. But first I had to find out what my problem was and to admit that yes, I had become an alcoholic. My body had so changed that I could not put alcohol into it in any form. If you notice, step one is divided into two statements. There's a dash there. And being a teacher, I make my children pay attention to dashes, to commas, to words that are meaningful. There are two statements completely here. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol. My body is powerless over alcohol. That I have to understand. Dear God, I read the big book. I now teach speed reading in college. I've been a classroom teacher for 37 years, and then I got out of the classroom and went to the college and the public schools and went on to college work, and I teach speed reading. And I didn't even know how to speed read real well back in those days, but I read the big book. I read that dumb thing because you told me to read that dumb thing, and I read it. But I never really knew what it said. I didn't speed read it right. Because I didn't really pay attention to all of the key words that we have. Powerless over alcohol. If I would have looked at Dr. Silkworth's letter, that's been so beautifully spelled out for you and talked about already, when it said that this allergy is in my body and the obsession is in my mind, that's why I fought this thing for so long. And if I could once get that in my mind, then it would be pure insanity for me to ever put alcohol into my body again. I am allergic to penicillin. It is pure insanity for me to let a doctor give me penicillin, right? Because when he does, I stop breathing. I don't want to do that. I'm not through yet. So when I go to a doctor, that's the first thing I tell him. I am allergic to penicillin. It would be sheer insanity for me to say, go ahead and give me some of that penicillin because I'd like to stop breathing. All right, it would be pure insanity for me to know, now that I understand that this allergy is in my body, for me to put alcohol into it, knowing that my body will not accept alcohol in any form, under any circumstances. We lose a lot of our people because life begins to get good after 2 or 3 years. Things straighten out. We have our men back, or we have new ones. everything begins to level off. And we forget that it's not our lives, it's not all the unmanageability. It's that powerlessness to take that alcohol into our systems safely and be sure that we're going to be able to breathe. The second part of that statement says that our lives had become unmanageable. You can't manage a life based on lies. There is no way. As I say, I don't in any way want to put down the pain that you men went through. But you know, you can get away with so much more than us gals can. You can get all balled up and you can put a lampshade on your head and you can get on the table and you can dance and kick up your heels and people think you're funnier than a crutch. But let me just paint that picture of that woman on that table with that lampshade. And there isn't anything funny about it. People use one word when they see that I don't ever want applied to me again, and that's, isn't she pitiful? They'll laugh at that man, but they won't at the woman. Our lives had become unmanageable. Our lives hurt that man that we're living with, hurt those children that we're living with. The man's not around as much most of the time. But the mother that's lying there on the couch, lying to that child even and saying, "Honey, Mama's sick today." There is no way to keep your life manageable and live like that. But when our 12 and 12 breaks it down, it says, who cares to admit complete defeat? There isn't anything so out of the ordinary about us fighting this thing when we come in here, because I know that there's somebody out there that was not a blooming success either, like I was. I did not walk to you and say, here I am, and never had any more trouble. And I imagine there's a couple out there that stumbled around for quite some time too. It isn't real. I felt so aggravated with myself each time I would go back out there and drink again. Why couldn't I accept the fact that I was alcoholic? Why couldn't I keep knowing this? And I would get so put out. The 12 and 12 tells me here, who cares to admit complete defeat? From the time our youngsters are small, and from the time you were small, just a little kid, you tried to do something and didn't do it quite right, and what did Mama say? Come on, sugar, you can do it. Try again. You can do it. Just try harder. Try doing it this way, and maybe it'll be better. We're taught that from youngsters. To overcome failure. So it's not out of the ordinary that we again and again and again go out there and try. Either before we get here or after we get here. Because who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one. Every natural instinct cries out against the idea of personal powerlessness. It's ingrained in us to try and try again. It's truly awful to admit that, glass in hand, we have warped our minds into such an obsession for destructive drinking that only an act of providence can remove it. The bottom paragraph on that page says, we know that little good can come to any alcoholic who joins AA unless he has first. We can take beautiful inventories We can do beautiful 5th steps. We can just do all this stuff. But it reminds us here with a word. And when I want my students in my classrooms to remember and to really learn something, I ask them, now circle that word. Because it's circled in my book. First, accepted his devastating weakness and all of its consequences. I had to look and see what alcohol had done to me. In that first step, to look at the unmanageability of Willie's life. Because really, when I looked at it, I realized that I could no longer depend on my own word. And to be a whole, complete human being, we have to be able to depend on our own word. I could not promise you that I would do anything after I took that first drink. That I would do anything or that I wouldn't do anything. And either one of those things brought on some terrible consequences. But I could no longer guarantee my behavior. That's unmanageability. But first I had to realize that alcohol didn't just make me drunk. As Charlie has emphasized up here this morning, it's not just the things I did when I was drinking. And a lot of us gals, in the last part of my drinking, I hold up. We get in those bedrooms, and we get in those living rooms on that couch, and we draw those drapes, and we take that phone off the hook. It was more so even back in my day than it is now, because we were stationed in a lot of different states that didn't even allow women in bars. I could go to the officers' club by myself, but I couldn't go into other bars by myself. So as things began to get bad and I began to drink when my husband wasn't around, there wasn't too many places for me to go back then, out and circulating the way I really liked to drink in the beginning. Because I'm not one of the quiet, shy type. I like to put on the war paint and go raid the village. And I had a lot of fun sitting in there in that officers' club drinking. See, I had a lot of good years drinking. And maybe you did too, and maybe that's one of your stumbling blocks right now, is because you can remember those good years and wonder why when people talk from podiums. That's why we emphasize, go to a lot of meetings, listen to a lot of alcoholics. Listen to them. Because a lot of them didn't have trouble from the very first drink they ever took. Yes, many people, that allergy was there the first time they put alcohol into their system. But many people, it was not there. It developed over a period of years. Don't throw a blanket over Alcoholics Anonymous. Don't throw a blanket over alcoholics in general. Don't let anybody else throw that blanket. You watch. God's given you your mind back, and He wants you to use that brain. Look and see and listen to the people. You don't have to be one way or the other. You decide. Don't measure yourself by everybody that you hear and try to fit into categories where you don't fit. That's what I was trying to do. I wasn't alcoholic because I didn't have all these problems from the very first drink I ever took. We had a lot of fun in the beginning drinking. A lot of good times. And I couldn't get those out of my mind. And realized that when I came to you, that my whole life was unmanageable. It didn't matter whether it had always been unmanageable. But I had to see that every area of my life was affected in all of its consequences. Until he so humbles himself, his sobriety, if any, will be precarious. And I always like to remember there that a lot of people are walking around with sobriety. But I want more. I'm not just satisfied to be without alcohol in my system. I want to be a better person. Every day of my life, I want to be better than I was the day before. I'll never reach sainthood. I know that. My husband reminds me every once in a while, you'll never get there, honey. And that's not what I'm striving for, but just to be a little bit better. That's what I want. So I'm not willing to just have sobriety and to have the type that I see sometime walking around in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been sober 20 years. I was a sorry SOB when I got here, and I'm still a sorry SOB. I don't want to be that. I want to be better. I was a mess, a wreck when I got here. And I'm not satisfied just to get alcohol out of my system and not be drunk anymore. I want to be better. Through this program, I can undo the devastation that alcohol did to me. I can undo that. I can rearrange these things. Of real happiness, he will find none at all. You know, we're going to get to the promises later on in the big book, Charlie and Joe. There's going to be promises on a page, and we refer to those promises. There's a lot of promises in this program. And there's some of them that aren't positive promises. There's one right there. Of real happiness, he will find none at all unless he has accepted that his life is unmanageable. And unless we admit complete defeat, this is the main taproot from which our whole society has sprung and flowered. This acceptance is so hard for us to get. When the first challenge to admit defeat, most of us revolted. We had approached AA expecting to be taught self-confidence. Then we had been told that so far as alcohol is concerned, self-confidence was no good whatever. In fact, it was a total liability. Our sponsors declared that we were the victims of a mental obsession so subtly powerful that no amount of human willpower could break it. There was, they said, no such thing as the personal conquest of this compulsion by the unaided will. Relentlessly deepening our dilemma, our sponsors pointed out our increasing sensitivity to alcohol. An allergy, they called it. The tyrant alcohol wielded a double-edged sword over us. First, we were smitten by an insane urge that condemned us to go on drinking, and then by an allergy of the body that ensured we would ultimately destroy ourselves in the process. Few indeed were those of us so assailed who had ever won through in single-handed combat. We had tried all of the ways to do it ourselves, hadn't we? All of our ways, a few of them are described in that big book. And you get with a bunch of alcoholics and you'll find some new ways all the time. That we tried to get around this. We tried using that will. I can do it if I do this first. I'll be able to drink if I get to feeling better. If I poke all these vitamins in me. If I get my life straightened out. If I poke all these other things in me. It was a statistical fact that alcoholics almost never recovered on their own resources. Another promise. And this has been true, apparently, ever since man has first crushed grace. We don't have a new disease. We don't have a new disease. And that helped me to understand by going back and realizing that alcohol's been around a long time. It's been around longer than any other drug. It's an anesthetic type drug. And the things it can do to us. In AA's pioneering time, none but the most desperate cases, on page 22, could swallow and digest this unpalatable truth. Those men that had lost everything they had practically. But see, we're getting, and you gals that are working with other gals, remember there may be a lot of them coming to you that haven't lost everything. More of us gals get here with our men just barely, if we do. You know, a woman will stay with a woman drunk for 20 years and he'll die and she'll go out and marry another one. But all you gals know that there isn't any, very, very few men are going to hang around living with a woman drunk. And see, the woman of the wife of the man alcoholic will come in and she'll go into Al-Anon and she'll get this beautiful program and turn into the butterfly and all of these things. And, you know, you never walked into an Al-Anon room that was crowded with men. Those of us who are fortunate enough to get here with our men are fortunate indeed, but we must not demand that they take part in our program. And as I do some of the other steps, I want to re-emphasize this. Because so many of us have to sort of go it alone. We don't have the cooperation and the understanding and the participation that the women will give their men. That's the nature of the beast, gals. And that's okay. That's okay. Because, see, I married my man way back there. And we just celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary. I still got that dude. Before this weekend's over with, you're not going to know how I still have him, but I still have him. But, you know, we didn't. It emphasizes in here that there's so many now, and even 14 years later, after the big book, that they realized there was a different type alcoholic beginning to come in that hadn't lost everything they had. So that our bottom had to be a bottom of our minds so many times. I still had that man. I still had a beautiful way of life going on out there that I couldn't participate in. I still had these things, but I was absolutely bankrupt in my mind. There was nothing left. Alcohol had taken it away from me. And we have to realize when we're working with the younger women, there are going to be a lot coming to us that have not lost everything they have. And we have to refrain from telling them the good old, that I hear every once in a while, the good old saying, you know, I've spilled more whiskey than you ever drank. Remember that it isn't the amount. Look at the woman's eyes. And look at that new fellow that walks in. Look at his eyes. You can tell by that how much he's lost. You don't have to look at his clothes. You don't have to look the way she wears her hair, or the fact that she hadn't combed it in 6 weeks. That's not what you look at. Look at the eyes, and you can tell whether they've lost enough to admit complete defeat. We make such a big deal out of that, and it's really not all that big a deal. I was fighting this acceptance. See, I would admit that I was an alcoholic. I would admit at meetings, my name is Willie and I'm an alcoholic. But I could not go in that one step further and say that I accepted that. I was not willing to live with that. You told me I was going to have to live with it the rest of my life, and I said, no way, Jose. Somehow or another, I'm going to change that. I could not accept being a woman alcoholic with all of the connotations that go with being a woman alcoholic. We're not excused for a lot of our alcoholic behavior as you men are. Society does not make the excuse for us. It's macho a lot of times to go out and hang one on for the man, but it isn't for the woman. and to accept this and to really be able to stand up and say to these nice people that had it all together, I am an alcoholic, and really accept it in my mind. And a beautiful man straightened me out on this by not giving me some deep philosophy. As Joe and Charlie have kept reminding us all weekend so far, and will remind us again and again, this is a simple program with simple ideas, not complicated. I want it to be deep and profound. Some people say that's the Texan in me. Some people say that's the school teaching in me. I'm from German heritage. Some people say that's the German in me. But whatever it is, I want it to be deep and profound. And I wanted you to give me some real deep stuff and some real deep reasoning behind all this. And you kept on with these silly things like easy does it, one day at a time. This was too simple. But it was the simple things that the men in Alcoholics Anonymous gave to me that finally got through this thick-headed German brain of mine. And he said, Willie, I'm going to tell you a story. Been passed around in AA for a long time. I know a lot of you have heard it, but a lot of people are new here, and I'm going to tell it again. Because I like our old stories to stick around. We forget to keep retelling them and retelling them and retelling them because there's new people sitting there. He said, when these great big heavy trucks first came in, people absolutely, the men didn't know how to handle them. They'd been used to driving the smaller trucks. And we decided that we better see if they were really psychologically prepared to handle all this weight and all this mechanism they had here. So we decided not to just give them a driver's test and see if they could drive it, but to see if they were up here prepared to handle those big 18-wheelers. And he said, we gave them the driver's test, and then we took them in a little room and gave them a thought test. Took this old boy in there, and he had passed his driving test real fine. He could back that thing up and turn it around and get it into these little stalls and everything. But they got him in there in a little room, and they gave him a hypothetical situation, and they said, some dark night, if you were coming down a steep hill, and you got right down to the bottom of it, and you applied your brakes, and it had been raining, and it was slick, and your brakes didn't hold, what would you do? The old boy thought a minute, and he said, I'd wake up Leroy. And the man thought, well, now, fine. He feels compassion for his helper. That's good, but I want him to put it into words. And he said, well, why would you wake up Leroy? And he said, well, Leroy, he ain't never seen a great big wreck. That's the simplicity that Joe and Charlie are talking about. Now, that old boy figured out. He wasn't real educated. He didn't have a bunch of degrees hanging on the wall, but he figured out real quick that there wasn't nothing he could do about it. He wasn't going to get out and hold his arms up and stop that truck. And the inevitability of knowing that alcohol is going to kill us is not all that complicated. You just stick around just a little while and watch the people that go out there and try it. Be a little bit smarter than I was. Let the other people do the experiment. Let them try it and watch them. Come back and come back and come back. On page 23, it's a tremendous satisfaction to record that in the following years this changed. Alcoholics who still had their health and their families and their jobs and even 2 cars in the garage began to recognize their alcoholism. As this trend grew, they were joined by young people who were scarcely more than potential alcoholics. See, there is such a thing as potential alcoholics. A lot of people coming to us, a lot of people that pick up those desire chips, they're not only failing because they're not using the program. They are the potential alcoholics coming to us. And the more kindness the more understanding we can show them, the more of them we're going to get back when they get to be real alcoholics. If we're impatient with them, if we tell them you haven't suffered enough, if we try to rub a little bit of this program off on them when they do come to us as potential alcoholics, they'll come back. They'll remember our kindness. They'll remember our joy. And this is one of the reasons why, even on a tan day that I've had and it's not too good, when I walk in my meeting, I do put that smile on my face. I do try to let the joy of sobriety show through. I can go into my pout again when I get home. Some people may say that's phony. That's all right. Whatever turn you're on. But I like to go into that meeting because there may be that one woman sitting there, that one young man, that's what he'll remember, is the happiness, the joy that he felt in the room of people that had been to hell and back, and that he heard them talk about it, and that they were happy about their sobriety. That's what's going to bring them back. It was obviously necessary to raise the bottom the rest of us had hit to the point where it would hit them. By going back in our drinking histories, we could show that years before we realized it was out of control, realized that we were out of control, that our drinking even then was no mere habit, that it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. So we can help emphasize to these potential alcoholics that are coming to us that even long ago there were little signposts that we could have picked up and saved ourselves. Give them those little signposts so that when they hit one as they're back out there practicing and drinking some more to get to be real alcoholics, then they will remember those signposts. That's the main thing I gave to my son as I was raising him. When he got up where I knew he was going to be out and away from me, were those little signposts of alcoholism that begin to appear for many of us. And they're all along the way. They're all along the road. Little mile markers. Those are the things that we can drag up in our histories to tell those people about. To the doubters, we could say, perhaps you're not an alcoholic after all. Many of those men told me, said, Willie, maybe you're not alcoholic. Won't you go out there and try some controlled drinking? And when I would wake up after one of my controlled drinking sprees, I would call them every name in the book for giving me this advice. But it was the best thing they could have done to me. They convinced my husband to quit, hiding my booze. Don't hide her booze. When you leave on a flight, you should be sure that house is full of it. But just buy a couple of good bottles of scotch. Because, see, that always started on good scotch. But then, fill that liquor cabinet up with some real good cheap wine, too. Let her get down to that cheap wine. They convinced him that he could help me a little bit to progress in some of this controlled drinking that I was trying to do. Why don't you try some more controlled drinking, bearing in mind, meanwhile, what we have told you about alcoholism and the signposts. This attitude brought immediate and practical results. It was then discovered that when one alcoholic has planted in the mind of another the true nature of his malady, that person could never be the same again. And that's why we say, give us a little bit of your time and we'll sure screw up your drinking. Because I would go back out there and drink again, but I never forgot what those men, things that they had said at meetings that made absolutely, that I just cast aside immediately. That doesn't apply to me. But man, coming off that drunk that next day, I would remember it. Even when I didn't want to remember it, I would. Page 24. Why all this insistence that every AA must hit bottom first? The answer is that few people will sincerely try to practice the AA program unless they have hit bottom. That's a promise. For practicing, AA's remaining 11 steps means the adoption of attitudes and actions that almost no alcoholic who is still drinking can dream of taking. Who wishes to be rigorously honest? Hurts sometimes to be rigorously honest, when we'd like to decorate it up a little bit. Who wishes to be rigorously honest and tolerant? Who wants to confess his faults to another and make restitution to harm done? Who cares anything about a higher power, let alone meditation and prayer? I mean, my problem's booze, people. That's what I kept telling them. My problem is booze. All this business about meditation and prayer and inventories and all that junk, I don't care anything about that. I just don't want to get drunk when I drink. Teach me how to do that, and I'll be on my way. Maybe that wasn't your attitude when you came here. It was mine. Who wants to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry AA's message to the next sufferer? No, the average alcoholic, self-centered in the extreme, doesn't care for this prospect unless he has to do these things in order to stay alive himself. Under the lash of alcoholism, we are driven to AA. There we discover the fatal nature of our situation. Then and only then do we become as open-minded to conviction and as willing to listen as the dying can be. We stand ready to do anything which will lift the merciless obsession from us. Admitting that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. If you have conquered this yourself, if you have thoroughly taken your step one, be sure that you remember how you felt about these things when you came in, so that you can help that new person that's coming in, or that man or gal that's still struggling after 4 or 5 years of being without alcohol in their system, but they still are holding something back, that maybe somehow, some way, if things are just right, they can drink again. Remember how you hated to give this up, how you hated to admit complete defeat. Help them to understand what this complete defeat means. That it doesn't always mean a loss of family, jobs, money, material things. That the defeat can be way down deep inside of you. Remember how you felt. Pass that feeling on, because that's how we help each other, is to pass those feelings on. And remember that it was hard for you to realize that your life had become unmanageable. And that invariably you would feel good for a while after not drinking. But then your life would get into such a mess. I always like to say that if my life becomes unmanageable again, I will drink again. Or else I will be a thoroughly unhappy, irritable, discontent, and restless person. I don't want to spend what time I have left on this earth restless and irritable and discontent. Even if I'm stone cold sober, I don't want to spend the rest of my time like that. And if I let myself get that way again, then I'll either do one of two things. I may not go out there and get drunk, but I'll be miserable. And I'm not willing to settle for that. I want the joy. And I want the fun. Now, we were supposed to stop a few minutes for a discussion, and I apologize that we were running a little close there because we were a little bit late getting started. But in our steps, as we take them as we go along now and run them in between the study of the big book, we will give y'all an opportunity. And I promise you that tonight when I hit step 5, that I will give you time to share, because that's what our steps are all about. We want you to share with us. And I promise you that by tonight I'm going to make them get started on time. And I did take a few minutes of my time to point this out to you because I thought maybe it'd be interesting to you and make you realize that if you have some time, be grateful for it every single day. Hold on to it. Nourish it. Take it like your favorite flower and give it some nourishment. Don't take it for granted. Because look at the dropout rate. It's not a thing to be afraid of, but it's a good caution. Thank you. I'll see you tonight.